Hello? Hello? Do you hear me? Okay. Good morning. Thanks for you for being present, and thank you to Georgia for the organizer. I beg your pardon. English is not my native language, so I'm Italian, and maybe I will made some misspells. Also, I suggest that as a brief, it's half an hour, 40 minutes. If you have questions, suggestions, if you are interested in to know having information about my book published in English, text by Michael Bertiaux, I will be here Saturday and tomorrow. So I will enjoy to talk with each one of us. And we start, okay? Well, nowadays, there is a plethora of books on Spare. We are writing even theses at the university. And this beyond the cult phenomenon testified the raising interest from the contemporary esoteric and artistic community towards the work of for my opinion, one major guy in the Western occult of the last century. What is the influence of this magus artist that after the bombing of the German Nazi on London lost his house, living the rest of his life in a situation extremely poor, sleeping on 2 chairs. He didn't have a bed and ignored, if not of his death, for a short piece as a genius artist going to the dog till his death. We'll not talk about his biography. We are in internet and mobile age, so you could find everything around. But I'm trying, very quickly to check and to talk about the spreading of the work on Spare, and then a brief examination of his main themes. The 60s and the 70s will be remembered surely for the spreading of consciousness in various miscellaneous fields, an opening toward alternative experience, the Eastern mysticism, meditation, and this atmosphere permits to create a space for themes most unusual, linked to creative experiences, music, art, magic. Beginning of publication of the so-called Typhonian trilogies from the English author Kenneth Grant, Revival of Magic, Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, the articles of him on the countercultural magazine It in London, and then the publication of the book Images and Oracles by Austin Osman Spare sowed the seed of the evaluation of the work of the London voodooist, as Michael Bertiaux called him. So Spare didn't pass unnoticed. This is Kenneth Grant with Steffi Grant, his wife, a big relationship in the 50s with Austin Osman Spare. And Grant created some kind of a myth around, but it was founded because he was so cool, Austin Osman Spare. And so didn't pass unnoticed if, some of the protagonists of this year limited the circle of people, started to present his work and to start build what it will be found as a new approach to occult and esoteric activities that will continue till today under the name, for example, of chaos magic. Most important exponent of this movement may be considered this is a portrait of Kenneth Grant by Spare. But we know that one of the most important exponents of this movement may be considered Lionel Snell, which is the godfather of chaos magic, better known also as Ramsay Dukes, and also Peter Carroll with Liber Null. And their doctrines follow in many cases was set by Spare in his work, even in some cases in controversial manner, as we see later regarding Sigils' magic of results. The 80s. After some year, beginning in the 80s, as happened to me, there's come a new creative impulse tied to the vast interest in Spare from the so-called industrial alternative culture, more related to extreme themes as carried out in music, art, related publication. There was a lot of fanzine, I don't know the spelling, text works related to the experience of William Burroughs, Brian Geising, extreme art, performance art, and wide interest in magic and in the works of Aleister Crowley and Austin Osman Spare, publication related to house at the time were extremely limited, and were articles on obscure Xerox fanzine, xerocopies, or printed to few copies, or reprints of his works published during Spare life, but in a very low quality, It is important to mention that who brought interest in the industrial scene on Spare has been John Balance, founder of the zine Stub Mental, male artist, and after in the band Psyche TV and then in Coil. It seems that the spark of his interest strikes some, and one of them is one of my best friends, Gavin Sample. This is Gavin Sample portrait. And I want to read some passages of my correspondence with him. We are close friends, because we have the same age and we have the same stuff, around. I was born in the 60s, so at the 80s I was 20 years old, And at 20 years old, what do? You kill everyone, You don't speak with adults. You don't give a fuck about them. You don't understand yourself. And so you try to find some correspondences. And we found out, scattered in this world, and we found with Spare. So, open quote, I was a throbbing Bristol fan from age 15, 1978, and carried my interest through Psyche TV. When I mentioned PTV to a friend at college, he brought me a copy of an article on Topi PTV out of a posh society journal called The Tattler. This included a photo of GPA, Genesis Pure Orange, at home with Spare picture in the background. I had been impregnating myself with the subculture side of thought, as we said. Surrealism, Barracks, Ballard, J. Ballard, existentialism, Madada, psychedelics. Since I became aware of TG from Bristol, so I started to look into magic as well. It just happened that I was squatting in London while I did it here, just one, then gave up at college. And while talking with one of the other squatters about Nietzsche, I mentioned the Spare. He had a copy of Images and Oracles, which he lent me. Well, eventually got back in 1989, after 6 years, when I had obtained my own copy. I devoured that book again and again, borrowing into the intricacy, trying out all sorts of mad experiments on sigil rituals, sexual behavior, music, drugs, dreaming. At the same time, I read a lot of material on 20th century magic, including chaos magic, which was all the rage at the time, and decided it was almost as silly with a grain of truth, covered up by much humbug, and posturing Spare as a thinker seemed to offer a useful way forward, and be set an example of how a person could display in their own imagination to create a system of gnosis by the simplest of methods, nourishing a rapport with one deep mind. So, this tide of interest towards Spare has reverberated in solitary practitioners, occult magicians, influencing in a consistent way the contemporary occult scenes. Publications starting from the 80s started to spread around. We mentioned Fulgur Press, which did a lot of good works, even the last one, which I suggest to you, Psychopathia Sexualis, which they found out a lot of drawings, very extreme by Spare, and it's published 2 or 3 months ago. It's a very beautiful book. So, and I think that one of the most faithful contribution to the evolution of the doctrines of Spare and to the consolidation of a magical acting is one of the English poet, magus, and artist Andrew Chambly. He passed away in 2004. He was in his 30s, and Chambly seemed to be gifted with the Promethean quality of bringing a spark of that light of the heaven on earth. Publishing at a very early age, he wrote Azoetia at 19 years old, so it was very weird, One of the most fundamental contemporary grimoire of magic. Also, here we could find profusely concepts and tendencies explicated by Spare in the work of Chambly with his group, the Cultus Sabbati. So we could notice that the work of Spare is not a static work, but is absorbed by whom? that want to try in his study and in the knowledge of his way, you know. So I mentioned Zos Kia by Gavin Sample, and also by the German author Jan Fries, or Fries, I don't know the spell, with visual magic, with are books very simple that could start to introduce yourself and go deep in the study of Spare, you know. So why I'm interested in Spare? As I said, you know, at 20 years old, I was born in 1961, so I took a bit of the tide of the 70s and were punk in Ice Age, you know, industrial culture. So you couldn't find no fucking reference around, you know, because at 18 years old, who talks to an adult? Nobody, you know, they don't understand you. So it's kind of find a correspondence, as you say. Quote, open quote, I will quote some text by Spare, phrases. He said, go wherever you have seminal affinities. So save the satyros. So why I'm interested in Spare? Relationship with the invisible world. Its approach to life, very stoic. He said, I'm a stoic, you know. His attitude. And I must thank exclusively Spare for having started my graphic work in drawing and in painting as means for dealing with my inner demons, or maybe outside demons. Putting out that inner charge that otherwise was going to become unexpressed in my other activities as music and as study. So his art is sublime, you could see. And the automatic drawings, he taught me how to work on automatic drawings, which is a connection for the invisible world. I suggest you to see Raw Vision, which is a magazine in England where you have also a site which is devoted only to folk art, self-taught art, and art from psychic worlds, you know. And you will see that there is a lot of psychism, you know. They are connected to the invisible world, you know, and they try to express through their heart in the most humble way. So Spare is modern. He attracts. So the best way is to immerse oneself in his text and images. Also, he did the divinatory cards. He did the practical magic that remind also the Lucky Udo by Michael Bertiaux, to do good, to do bad. The witch, and also the connection with some kind of current which is fluently in England, like the witchcraft, the rural witchcraft, and so on. So we could say, generally speaking, that religions, or so-called the spiritual systems, present two main themes. Imagination. Imagination creates, and then emotion. So Austin Osman Spare build his own and invite anyone to create it, you know. In the inner research, I think that anyone needs to find, as I said, correspondences with their own moods and feelings, and to each one feel as his own determined pathway, individual and collective. Many times we used to find an affinity with the personalities that have already walked this funambolic path, that at the end is our life, catapulted in this planet without knowing who we are, from where we came, where we go, and searching in the outer existence to disentangle this terrible ank that is to understanding something to it, and to relay it to what we see around us with all our senses. Sometimes magic initiated pathways, that there is a misunderstanding, or what could be a spiritual master of a guru. Someone who could give you the key to the secrets to people who evidently don't have, don't own. And then so in this way he could elevate the adept or disciple upon his previous level, which they don't have. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes not, you know, I think. I think that it's a fact established that this is a mutual recognition of a search which involve both. And for the side of a disciple, this is the recognition that all his efforts and his dead ends, hours spent to lose time with his own existential impulse, has been and are the only road to take, you know. That is right for his or her own self. For this, I could say that Spare is my spiritual guru, because he had made explicit, not without pain and suffering, as life is, what I was feeling closer. And surely the books of Spare, convoluted in the sense that the writing was not his priority, means could be considered a true magical grimoire. Considering his position to the light of what happened in the past century, we could see as his thought regarding religion, social control, just quoting Naked Scientology by Barrocks, you know, confront everything, you know. To discourage, deter followers, it is extremely modern, very interesting, as in reference to spiritual movements that are forming in these last years, these last decades. Typical case, fucking New Age, New Paganism, so called occult orders, with very tales of polemics, premises, sometimes invented tradition, for giving them a tone. Grant himself declared that to be in tune with the Zos Kia cultus, it could only be reached at last if you are able to be in rapport with the spirit of the cult. Sometimes they call it afflatus, divine inspiration. Open quote by Spare. Shit. Jumpers to conclusion. Generalizationist. Oh my God, I couldn't read. Malapropists. Dream-fed wishful thinkers. Self-hypnotized ideologists. Materialists. Maya mongers. Zombie zenists. The dirty, tedious apologies of God and man, and many other schools, all destroy their own arguments by having to make use of that which they deny. Thus, know that nothing can be known, which at least implicit that you know that you cannot know. I said that knowledge is the potential of knowing ultimately all things. Again, all is illusion, all is unreal, the intelligence is false. We have no direct experience of personality and ad nauseam. And so we have the reality of illusion as one delusion falsifying another. I consider Spare a Gnostic, because the work of Spare sometimes have been undermined as magic of results. You do sigils, you acquire something of material stuff, you know. The creation of sigils for attain one munda and wishes, even the most trivial one. If we have a brief reading, we could see that there is something deep, you know. Contemporary authors tracing Spare Taoist influences from Chan and Japanese Zen, of Buddhist doctrine of the void, or sunyata. And some see them anticipates the structuralism of Jacques Derrida and the neuro-linguistic programming. So there is something more, you know. But so, Spare say, I hope humbly to remain also always I am I, which recalls permutation of Brian Gisin, artist, I am that I am, and all the history of Gnosticism, and for example of the Eastern Vedanta, that divine spark, as we said, buried inside us under strata of mental masses, aborted and lived reincarnation, and our own desires. Without our high, without this enlightenment or direct experience, because this is not a simple saying I'm a high, you know. We don't go anywhere. We are prey to our compulsions, and it will be difficult for us to understand our role in this bizarre universe. Open quote. For I'm high, ergo, the truth of myself, my own sphinx, conflict, chaos, vortex, asymmetric to all rhythms, oblique to all paths. I am the prism between black and white, with white, mine own unison in duality, end quote. Relation of ourself and the various parts of our organism intended as human being with the other, with the environment, with the outward, is another Gnostic then. Spare is well aware of dualistic nature of his manifestation of ours, and the solution is always the saying given with the from the great master along the centuries: accept all things, To be involved in this dualism, so accepting it is the chance to overcoming it. Open quote. And remember, you shall suffer all things, and again suffer until you have sufficient sufferance to accept all things. Zos Kia and beyond. The system of Spare is a refined methodology based on some key points between them. The first is the interrelation between Kia and Zos. Kia being the first or primordial reality, the unmanifest, the eternal possibility waiting to manifest here in the flesh, the source of all existing phenomena. The synonymous in this state could be in Kabbalah, Ein Sof, Hour, or like implicit order by the physician David Bohm, or Buddhist Sunyata, Indian Brahma. Zos, the body considered as a whole, our present incarnation in this universe interacts with the reality and try to find this return to its originary source via the practice and the overcoming of the dualistic cage with a peculiar and particular solution. Zos, also incarnating, is acting a desire already predefined, with it, but will be his task to accomplish for spreading reality, really is or her potentialities. This doesn't come as mistakenly thought via kind of irresponsible will, but a precise taking charge of consciousness that includes responsibility and discrimination. Open quote. There is a tendency toward theosophic paranoia and mental diarrhea, such as there is no law beyond do what thou wilt. This backward concept serves as his eigen substrate of the occult, equal only by the blowly meaningless scribble of youth, and evince a great fear of responsibility. Our own laws are arbitrary and may be broken, but we do not escape the consequences of their violation. None is beyond good and evil, times or dimension with their laws. End quote. The death posture, whatever could be, precise practice, mental state produced, is the method for reaching this state called Kia. And Spare gives some example like, hyperventilation, staring in front of the mirror, staying in the tip of the toe and then collapse and then some kind, overcoming. And or a state called the in-betweenness. That, for example, you reach when you are near to sleep and at the same time you are present with our perception and sensation, working through the interstices. Another backbone cornerstone of the conceptual architrave of Spare is the overcoming of dualism in this universe is the concept of neither, surpassing the dualism via the opposites, that creates a neutral space which in turn must be put in opposition to another state for creating an additional neither, and so to arrive to the so-called Kia state, as a state of void. Another contribution apart from pentacles, talismans of the past, or the famous Eastern yantra, didn't have so much counterparts in the modern Western world as been the use of sigils. And the attention posed to the creation of automatic drawings as forms of functional psychism. Sigils, touching the strings of the subconscious with a particular methodology, extremely original, not to be confused with the symbol, which works also in the unconscious. You could read the Psychomagic by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Arrived to enter in tune with it and to bring the realization of their own desires, even if they may require various incarnations for attaining, as the desire, as Spare says, will be accomplished ever in any case. But the conscious desire specified by Spare has a hard time to attain itself, as in that moment it creates the opposite, the failure. And so one could find himself entangled in a completely mental mass from which is difficult to sort out. Touching the subconscious instead, the source of every possibility, with the sigil instead many times beneficial and fruitful. And this is linked to the methodology of the utilization of elementals, servant spirits, that was spread also by practitioners of chaos magic. This is the aspect that attracts most the young practitioners, but it's also the one which could lead you astray, The same Spare has spoken in a clear way. When you decide something, anything that you are focused on, you prepare a sigil, you charge it, you forget it, and one day you will attain what you have wished. You are happy about it, but Spare advises that you must be aware that it's only the lowest step of a ladder, very long, Because the play of the desire is not a simple game. It must be understood when it implies a certain clear determination of your own goals and tasks for not falling in the inferno of the normal, I made an example. How many minutes I have?
We're a little bit over time.
We have finished. Okay. I'm sorry because I'm not used to have half an hour of talk, Usually it's like 40 minutes and more. But anyway, it's like this, So, there is a complex, I suggest you that if you are never read him, to find his books, they are available in English text, and you could work on it, and you could find something that I think you will appreciate a lot, So, for ending, the work of Spare is continual discovery. Even for the person who have devoted many years at his study and his practice, and this I think it will happen more and more in the future. Artist, magus, mystic, philosopher. Spare is surely a genius, but any and each of us could be. When you invest all your efforts in creative activity and following the true art, and not that false that widely we could find everywhere in the daily world nowadays, Spare is promoting new sexuality, the search of our atavistic resurgences, buried strata of our being powerful and dangerous at the same time, if not taken with the due preparation, obsession, ecstasy of self-love, is at extreme reconciliation within your own being and the cosmos, and the consciousness to be conscious of this life here in this planet, and that our task is to live in the flesh our desires. An impulse to freedom, to creativity, to take in charge of your life that must only make us appreciate what this derelict artist, regular, popular places himself poor, with devotee of common sense, of the love and the love of cats has done for all of us. Thank you. Blessing to all you.